I'm the type of person, if you ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I'm gonna tell you that I don't know. But I bet you what, I know how to find the answer, and I will find the answer.
Alright, to you, McCorge, that is of course Irish for a very warm welcome, my friends, to Shamrocks and Shanks, another episode where we get to learn from some of the best professionals in the golf world. Now, my guest for this episode is Alex Clapp. Alex is one of the premier golf coaches in Europe and is currently based at Enmore Park Golf Club in the south of England. As well as helping many club golfers achieve their goals, Alex also works with many regional and mini tour players, as well as some DP World Tour golfers. At a time when the online coaching business is growing, Alex is one of the most sought after pros on the Skillest Platform and works with golfers all across the globe. Now in this episode, Alex distills some fantastic advice for the club golfer, ranging from current misconceptions he sees on the lesson tee and indeed online, to what process or methods might be the best for you assessing your own game. And he also gives us some nice drills and tasks for those slicers listening out there. For the coaching section, Alex discusses his road of influence and how he arrived at his current philosophy and preferences. We even discuss how bias can, in some cases, be a good thing. We show some of Alex's posts online when working with his players, and he guides us through what they're working on and why. And lastly, we get into what he's looking forward to in the future, both from a tech perspective and a career development viewpoint. I say this in the episode, but Alex is one of the Instagram accounts I really enjoy following because he demonstrates his perspective and reasoning so well. From afar, I felt he's one of the coaches doing it the correct way, as in he wants to get it right, not be right. And after this chat, I feel he is exactly that. An excellent golf technician, a fantastic conveyor of information, and an incredibly hard worker. So, Alex Clapp.
Hi, Alex Clapp. Very, very warm welcome to Shamrocks and Shanks. Thank you for reaching out to us or joining us from across the pond today. Hope the weather is slightly better over in the UK than it is in Canada at the moment, but is everything going well? And again, really, really warm welcome to the show. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. And it's a rarity that I get somebody come on and say that the weather is better in England than it is where they're based. So it has actually been really nice the last couple of days. Quite sunny, a little bit cold, but it's lovely when it's sunny.
Yeah, that'll work for us. I'll take that right now. Possibly the worst winter we've had since I've moved, kind of. But anyway, we digress. So for those who aren't familiar with you, you're becoming an ever bigger, larger presence online, on Instagram and many other social platforms, especially with the online coaching through Skillest and a lot of what you've done. But I think there's way more and far more to you than that. So I don't want to just label you as that. But if you could give me, maybe for those people that aren't too familiar with you as a golf coach, maybe just like 3 or 4 or 5 minute background into kind of where you kind of are right now, where you're based, and how you came to be there.
Of course. So I'm a golf coach down in southwest England. I do travel around a bit. I have a couple of players that are on kind of various challenge tours and kind of LET mini tours and things like that I travel around with a little bit as well. But kind of going all the way back, I'm from where I am now. Went to America, played college golf for 4 years down in Florida, a D1 school called Bethune-Cookman, which was great fun. Had a great time there. Moved back home back in 2013, I think it was. Tried to play some mini tour stuff. Always knew I wasn't good enough, but you know, like we all do, we give it a go. We're all failed players at some stage, right? And I always really loved coaching. I had a lot of my players when I was on my team always say, "Oh, do you want to have a look at me? Do you want to just have a quick look here?" And I always had an eye for the swing. We used to go down to Bay Hill and watch that every year. That's on this week, funnily enough.
Yeah.
And they'd all want to walk around the course, and I'd be quite engrossed in watching players on the range, working with their coaches and seeing what they were doing and what they were trying to achieve, ball fly-wise. So I found that super interesting. And once the playing didn't work out, I didn't give it a full go. I'd done it for about a year or two at most. Ventured into coaching. So I've been coaching now for over 10 years. Players right the way from beginner all the way to tour pros, which has been great. It's been a great learning curve. And I think that you learn, or I've learned certainly a lot more from teaching members and higher handicappers, getting them better versus tour pros. There's certainly different elements involved in each, but I've had a different experience with all golfers that I've taught, really. That's what brought me back home teaching. Teach now, do a lot online, like Steve is alluding to there. I do a lot of online coaching to people worldwide, and that enables me to also travel and get around quite a bit as well. So I just got back from a PGA show and things in Florida, traveling around with the Skillest guys with online coaching. It's great. It's a great balance and a great mix right now of online coaching, in-person coaching, and popping out on the odd time to travel around on the tour. So it's good fun at the moment.
I think that's nearly becoming somewhat the model of a modern day golf coaches, where maybe it was a bit of an outlier 4 or 5 years ago to be so much online, and now it's nearly kind of you defer to that kind of orientation or that kind of principle. Do you find that when you started branching out to more the online, what kind of skills did you feel yourself challenged with getting better at from the in-person stuff, where definitely communication is a priority, of course.
Yeah.
But then when you go online, communication becomes even larger of a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I was very fortunate in my timing of online coaching. It was right at the start of COVID. So everyone wanted an online lesson because they were sat at home or at home stuck inside with a net in their garden. Driving nets sold out everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
You couldn't get hold of one because everyone wanted one to hit some balls in their back garden. But for me, certainly, I would say that the communication factor is really important, and you need to have a clear understanding and idea of your message and what you want the student to achieve in order to get success out of online. But the main thing that I would classify as a really important thing, not only online coaching, but in person as well, is that you really care about making students better. There's a lot of coaches, obviously not going to name names and things like that. I'm not slating coaches for saying this, but they see the online coaching as a gold mine for money and things like that. And I've never seen it as that. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. It's good for that side of things, but I'm not seeing it as that. I'm seeing it as helping golfers from all around the world get better. And that's kind of what drives me and drives my passion. So when people say, oh, the money's good, like I want to get onto it because the money's great. If you're driven by that, it's going to make it a lot more difficult to get success out of online coaching for sure.
Yeah, I think anybody I've ever talked to, when they start looking at it or mentioned looking at it from that perspective, it's not a great way to start out. And I think when I first started going on to Skillest, Baden always said to me, don't look at this as part-time coaching where it's an addition to what you do. It has to be treated with just the same respect as having a person in front of you as having a client online. And that's always held me in good stead with the online coaching.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a few things that I do from a personal perspective, such as include Zooms with all of my subscribers and most of my single lessons where they can hop on a Zoom, we can chat for 15 minutes. It becomes more personal then. You're not just a person behind a screen. You actually get to have a little bit of back and forth chat and communication with them. And I end up speaking to them more than my wife sometimes. So that she's not overly enamored about. But.
Yeah, well, it's the fallout of certain relationships online with Skillest, right?
Yeah.
But I definitely agree. I think jumping on a Zoom really does. It's hard to replicate that nice thing of, even the interpretation of verbiage, right? So, even as we're talking now, both of us kind of being more from kind of the European side of things versus the American, we have different phrases for different things. So even jumping on that online Zoom really helps that. And if we were kind of like looking at this podcast, we try to, at the start, go into a few things that can help the club golfers, and then we'll delve into the coaching side of things in the latter part.
Of course.
If we kicked off with the club golfers and we said, all right, the more we move on, as we're going in like with recently now at the show, you would have seen, a lot about grip pressure and force across the handle of the grip being discovered now. So we're discovering more and more how and why we do the things we do, which is fantastic, right? It really helps our development, our knowledge. What are some of the things that you still see coming up on your lesson tee or even on the virtual lesson tee, in terms of misconceptions of golfers, that they're still trying to do those certain things that they've heard from their mate or the YouTube or whatever that case may be?
Yeah, so there's a few things in there. The first thing is to note and to mention that we're in the best position that we could have ever been in golf instruction. Right? We've got everything available to us online. We've got every piece of equipment. We've got every piece of launch monitor and things we can utilize, training aids, to make sure that we're making the best possible experience, but making sure that we're doing the right things with students. So the first thing I would say, really, and one of the biggest misconceptions I see, is that they come with a single correct way to swing a golf club. They have this vision in their head of how a golf club should be swung. And, every player has natural tendencies. And every coach, including myself, has biases, right? We all have bias towards what we would potentially like to see a golfer move towards. But my job as a coach and the misconception is to recognize those biases and ensure that My preferences aren't just aesthetic, but are actually giving the player a mechanical advantage. You know, a baseline swing model sits somewhere between two extremes. And my role is to help players move towards the most functional version of their swing, not force them into a model that doesn't suit them. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that's kind of one of the most important things when people come into my lesson team. They're talking about, you know, you can talk about golf industry buzzwords at the moment, shallowing and this and that and whatever else. Mm-hmm. They have this idea in their head of how shallowing works or what they're trying to do, and it's generally wrong. And generally what they're trying to do with their golf swing is wrong. Yeah. They have the right idea of, I flip it. Well, okay, let's figure out why you flip it, and let's figure out if stopping flipping it is actually going to work for you. Yeah. Otherwise, it's pointless.
Yeah. So that nice discussion into the reasoning, you know, and the causation rather than the correlation, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, the goal is to move players into optimal parameters while keeping in mind what their swing should look like in a way that's functionally advantageous for what they need to do, not just appealing on the eye. Mm-hmm. And that kind of segues nicely into a misconception of what training aids potentially are used for, in my opinion. Yeah. People turn up with training aids because they love a certain training aid. They see all tour players use it. Now, I tend to try and only use training aids when we're trying to really shift the student's concept. And when we're trying to get them to understand what they're trying to do. It should never become a crutch where they just hit 1,000 balls with ball between their arms, etc. When stress levels arise, players react to their natural instincts. So it's bringing all those things together and helping the player understand that this ball isn't going to get you playing perfect between your arms. This, you know, whatever it might be, this band between your legs, this, you know, any training aids.
Yeah, smart ball. We could go
ball, anything. You could go down a massive kind of rabbit hole with training aids, mm-hmm. but they should be used, in my opinion, to help shift the concept. Right now, we've shifted the concept. Let's get rid of the training aid and start understanding how we should move. But the biggest misconception I see is definitely that there's one way. Oh, this is how you got to swing the golf club, and it's just simply not true for a humans in a single human's anatomy. Yeah. Or what they're actually looking to do with ball flight.
Yeah. I think there's some really, really interesting points you've made there, even in the idea of, you know, bias or preferences from a coach. Nearly gets a bad kind of rap, you know, like, that, like, it's nearly a nasty word to say. But if you're saying, you know, well, my bias is to make sure that I get the player moving around physically what they can and can't do, that's still a bias. That's still a preference, which is a very, very good one to have. So, you know, like sometimes that gets a bit of a bad word. And then even the idea, as you said, training aids, it's an aid to help you. And I remember talking to Dr. Will Wu, who does a lot of work with Mark Blackburn's players about this. And I had a player using the smart ball. And I was like, you know, how much should we be using this? How much should we not? And he goes, just use it enough. And I like, it was a very small answer, but within that answer was the reasoning. And it's like, don't overuse it, right? So it's an aid to get you a feeling, or as you said, an awareness, and sometimes that could be plenty.
Absolutely.
But I agree with the concept that a lot of players walk into that studio, walk into the teaching area with a very defined idea of what they feel they should be doing. And are you one of those coaches then? I know some coaches differ on this, but you know, I like to hear players where they're coming from. You know, for the first 5 minutes, I like to hear what they're thinking, what their ideas are. And then you can kind of change things with concept. I know other coaches maybe don't like to hear that, and they'll just look at what the player does and then go from there.
No, I want to hear everything that they're doing, what they have been doing, what they're trying to achieve. I'll sit and listen for the first 15, 20 minutes of a lesson, gathering data, listening to everything that they've experienced, trauma, asking questions. And again, it goes back to communication, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on. But it's really important for me that you understand that what the student is actually trying to do. Mm-hmm. And if their golf swing matches what they're trying to do with the ball flight. And if those two things are misaligned, which they often are, right, we need to switch that conception and get them understanding what it is they should be doing.
Yeah, perfect. And if we kind of segue off that, then, you know, we're not going to see between you and me every single player that's listening even to this podcast, we're not going to see them, most of them, on our lesson tees. So we're not going to have that chance to communicate. And some players, prefer not to go for coaching, which is absolutely fine. Do you recommend or encourage for players when they are looking to try and assess their own game? Is there certain methods or certain processes that, if anybody's listening to this and you would say, right, well, here's how you might go about just getting that little assessment of what you're doing, that even if you do go for a lesson, you're armed with a little bit more information, a little bit more exact information?
Best way to assess your game is to break it down to measurable data points. Too many golfers assume that their swing's the issue, when often their main scoring problems may come from poor decision making, inconsistent strike patterns, or inefficiencies in maybe short game performance.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to understand where your game's at from a data perspective, encouraging students and players that may be listening to a podcast or people that aren't even my students to track stats across multiple rounds, whether that's, I don't like to use fairways hit. I use specific for myself. I use things like penalty shots. And that's not just including out of bounds. That's if you hit it in the trees, that counts as one. Out of bounds counts as two. Okay. Instead of using greens in regulation, proximity to the hole. What if you take more than 3 from 150 yards and in, up and down percentages from certain yardages, key putting performances such as footage hold rather than the amount of putts that you've had. It kind of allows you as the student to pinpoint where strokes are won and lost and how you can then practice with purpose. 99 times out of 100, we're all consistent. And we talk about this word consistency, but that's another that could take 2 hours if we stayed on consistency. But we're all consistent. We're just all consistently doing things that we don't want to be doing. Right. So the guy that comes in and slices it, that doesn't want to slice it anymore, he hits a slice 99 times out of 100. So is it more functional for you to get your start line way further left and just keep hitting your slice? Then you don't have to change one. It's just a start line issue.
Yeah, right? The guy, I always hit it right. I'm like, that's your superpower. You always hit it there. It's a game predictability.
Always, you can smash it way down the left and you'll be great.
Yeah, and so, do you work on do you recommend any specific apps, or do you just get your players just to create their own kind of recording when they're looking at stats?
People can use apps. People can use, there's plenty of apps I use. I'll use Clip, Upgame, Decade. I've got players that work across all of those platforms. Fantastic. Which is fine. I don't mind what you use. There can be a preference in what you use. If people don't even want to buy and get into these platforms, simply filling out a scorecard with 5 different metrics whilst you're filling out your scorecard of what you're scoring. In column A, have you hit a penalty shot? In column B, have you made more than 3 from 150 yards? In column C, have you made an up and down? In column D, what's your proximity to the hole? And in column F, what's your footage hold? A couple of tick boxes. It just gives you a little bit more of a well-rounded assessment of your game, and a simple and effective way as well is to do like a lost shots journal. After each round, then look at your scorecards and assess what cost you the most strokes. Were they tee shots? Were they short putts? Were they up and downs? Was it your chipping? Was it wedge control? Identify those patterns that allow you to generate intentional practice. And once you've then got that intentional practice, rather than just hitting balls aimlessly thinking it's your golf swing, you'll definitely lower your handicap if you get better from 150 yards in it. It's a Tiger 5, isn't it? If you take more than 150 yards and then if you take 3 shots more than 150 yards in it, right? Guarantee you, if 99.9% of the people that are listening here abide by the Tiger 5s, I can't remember what they all are now, but certainly the one.
There was like, you've got 120 in, don't 3-putt, par 5s, and there's a couple of them.
No bogeys, par 5s. If you abide by the Tiger par 5s, you will be immediately potentially 5, 6, 7, 8 shots better. Easily. So it's not just about improving your golf swing. We're trying to get it in the hole quicker. So is what I'm going to do with my golf swing going to get it in the hole quicker? Maybe not.
I like that.
Access the low hanging fruit. Let's get that first, and then we can worry about the rest.
I like that. I like looking at it from a whole rounded perspective, right? More that macro kind of view of your whole game. And as you said, I love that phrase, practice with purpose, because even within that, what's practicing, it's really developing a skill I already possess. Then I'm learning from a lesson. So there's a lot more to that, like being on the range, the work you put in the range and the short game area, than just beating golf balls again and again. Because I think it's the stat that like everything we do throughout the day, 92% of that is automatic responses. So there's very little that we're actually doing that's new from day to day. So I would imagine it's quite similar when we look at golf.
Absolutely.
Things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Moving into that practice kind of side of things, if we're like, one of the things I, mentioned a little bit before we started this is I've tremendous amount of respect for the content that you place on social media, because it can be very easy to be a little bit, pedantic about that and just throw it up and throw something up when you're a little bit rushed for time. But every piece of your content, that I mean this genuinely, seems to have a good layout, but the information is really good. I find it beneficial and accurate, which is obviously a big bonus. When we're looking at drills, tasks, that presents a challenge on social media, because if I was to simply get on social media and believe very much in a task, let's say about low point, and I know if a player worked on this, that they would improve low point, but perhaps that's not for everybody. So when you're looking, let's say a golfer who slices the golf ball, and we'll more or less, we know what's happening at impact to create that pattern. We'll talk about a centered strike just to we'll take gear effect out of the concept. What's a nice drill or a nice exploration or a task that you would recommend to a player to work on the drive range if they want to change that slice?
Absolutely. So instead of just fixing slicing, figure out everything within your golf swing that's making the ball go right.
Okay.
And what can I do to make the ball go left?
Yeah.
Because essentially somebody that slices it has more slice tendencies than they have hook tendencies, right? The same way as if you're somebody that was fixing for hook, they have more hook than they do slice. That could be one of the hardest things for a slicer to do, is start the ball right of target.
Yeah.
Right. And actually trust that they can start it right at target. That's the first thing you need to learn. And it might start right and go a little bit further right initially, but you need to learn that awareness of a slice is something that potentially starts left over on the target and fades further away from the target, Now, it could mean grip adjustments. It could mean body movement changes. It could be just improving face to path awareness. But a simple drill, if you're going to look at a drill, is, a closed stance hook it drill. Can you stand way closed and hit me a hook? Or are you you cannot get the ball to move right to left? Okay. Now, if that means that you've had to shut your stance off, strengthen your grip, feel like you swing it more from the inside, but all of a sudden you hit a hook, now you're starting to understand what creates a hook versus what creates a slice. Once you have that feeling and awareness of what that does, you can then start to work your way back to neutral.
Right.
So I would say, for me, the biggest one, if you're just going to look at a generic drill, is develop awareness of what's functional and what an into-out path might feel like. Right.
Yeah, I like that. So you're kind of creating that challenge for the player, and through the challenge, they're going to learn. So you don't have to go into the semantics of every single facet and data parameters that's changing. Like we possibly see sometimes. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you this task. If you complete this task, you'll see the ball flight. If you complete it, we're moving towards or even further past what we'd like. And then we can just adjust it, like a little volume on the radio or whatever is absolutely fine. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, there's plenty of things that people post online. Oh, drill to fix your slice, right? You might do that thing as a hook player, right? So say that you're somebody that slices it, but you've already got a really strong grip. And the drill that somebody's put online to fix your slice is, you need to do this with your grip and strengthen it. All of a sudden you're like, well, that I already do that. So, and I still slice it. So what parameter do I need to do? So let me just actually understand what a hook looks like. And let me just rein it back a bit to see if I can get it to go straight.
Yeah, I like that. And, the idea of like looking at start lines, it can be a good way of getting players rather than the actual curvature. Just, okay, where's that ball starting? And then you can, as you said, go back to maybe okay, well, how much influence that face does have. Because even those little myths I saw from a person on social media, quite well known on social media nearly 3-4 weeks ago, posting that, well, the ball really, the start direction is influenced by the path, which is, we know, completely false. So even there is that still misinformation out there that we need to be careful of, and you know, we need to kind of sway away from. So it's tough for the golfers out there to
absolutely, it can be tough
to get the right information.
When everyone puts something online that says this is the number one drill that will fix that, it's great for clickbait and going to do really well with our social media algorithm, but it's horrible for the golfer. Tiger's quote where he said avoid YouTube, right? And I love I'm probably Tiger's biggest fan, right? One of Tiger's biggest fans. What my opinion Tiger meant by that comment is stay away from it, because you don't know what applies to you and you don't know what needs to apply to your game. Right?
There's zero context.
There's actual amazing information on YouTube. You know, you can learn so much from so many podcasts, webinars, seminars. But understanding what applies to you and applies to your game is probably the single most important thing that no amateur does.
100%. Like there's very few. Well, there is a couple, but there's very few. I think I have a book every year. I look at it and write down more things. It's like universal truths that apply across all. It's not a big book. It's probably about a page long, and I don't think it's going to get any longer over the next couple of years.
You're doing well to fill a page.
Big writing. We mentioned you'd be very successful in the online coaching area. You know, and you do very, very well there. A lot of good testimonials when you're looking on your Skillest page, which we'll put all that information at the end of this podcast. For players that may be still hesitant to explore this as a viable option, and I'm not talking people who just want to try it. I'm like, you know, good players who are serious about improving and look at what you do and go, oh, if only I was in England, you know, I'd really love to go see him in person, but I don't think I'm going to get as much out of it in person. What are some of the plus points and the advantages that you've maybe encountered and discovered as you've gone through this process? So not the ones that, you know, we can roll out like, oh, it's cheaper and it's more like maybe some of those ones that you didn't think of before and you've actually come across and go, oh shit, that's actually really good that I can do that now.
There's your ones that you're talking about there that are generic baseline things, such as it removes location as a barrier for students. It gives them access to personalized high quality instruction, the detailed video analysis, if that's something that you're going to do, structured practice plans and ongoing support. You know, all of those sort of things there make up what you would associate online instruction with at the higher level, should we say. I think the biggest advantage to me that it's overlooked often is that players can improve and practice quicker and more effectively because they can absorb the information at their own pace. You know, a big advantage is the convenience of that. If they wanted to book a lesson with me, you'll have to wait until April at least. You know, in person. Whereas if you go out in your backyard or you go out to your local driving range and hit a couple shots, you could take a couple videos and my turnaround time is 24 to 72 hours. You get it back in 3 days, worst case scenario. And not only that, instead of a one-off lesson, and I think this is a really bad trait in our industry, is there's still so many professionals that don't send through analysis notes, videos from the lesson. And I think instead of that one-off lesson where players forget half of the information and they don't actually apply the information correctly, they get that continuous feedback, they get the accountability, and they get that ongoing progress tracking. The good thing that I think about Skillest that I use the most is you can tag videos, they can search for the tags. And I do use Skillest now for all my in-person instruction as well. And it's the in-person instructions are shortened down or a lengthened version of my online instruction. I'll take few videos at the start. I'll stand there with the student, record my voice over the top, talking through everything we're going to do. I'll take some clips from the lesson, upload those into the lesson as well. And it's basically a lengthened version of what an online lesson is. So the ability to submit swings, receive breakdowns, get adjustments based on their specific tendencies, and the convenience of it makes online coaching a really powerful tool for long-term improvement.
And I like the way you referring back to what you mentioned earlier on, adding in that Zoom, so that little, you know, face-to-face, hey, you know, shoot me your questions live as we're talking here. What's your thoughts on this from the student? And he'll go, blah, blah, blah. And you'll go, well, actually, hey, let's have a look at this video. And this is kind of what I meant. And I think if we kind of segue slightly into what Skillest has done, in my mind, because about 2 years ago, I was using maybe 3 apps. I was using Coach Now, V1, and Skillest just for online and the Skillest. And Skillest then started charging, which was fine, no problems. But that made me maybe remove something. And now, eventually, now Skillest is all encompassing, right? The things that app can do for in person and online is absolutely fantastic in terms of the functionality of the app, and it's only getting better and better, which is great. And I definitely found when I started doing the online coaching and started doing monthly subscriptions and longer subscriptions, yearly subscriptions, that actually started bringing that concept into my in-persons. And so that was the influence from online for me was, it was really interesting in that way. And you kind of, okay, what's great here? And okay, well, I could do that there. And you kind of mix and match a little bit. But I agree with you. I think the idea of players, the old adage of getting your lesson, and then I'll see you in a month's time, and there's no feedback loop. And I'm not even talking, you don't have to be talking to the coach. I'm meaning like no lesson back, no feedback, no analysis.
It's too transactional a lot of the time.
Yeah. And I've been to some and hung around with some really great coaches in the last 2 years, like top coaches, and zero feedback after a session. Yeah. Which is interesting, and you kind of look at it and you go, okay, that's interesting. And you go and hang out with some really other great coaches, and it's very evident that there's feedback and they're very diligent about it. And, one of those would have been Butch Harmon when I was at his school a couple of months ago, and everything gets printed out. There's a folder and a binder for every player at the school, and everything gets put in that binder, and it's, no, this is all going to be collated, and you get all this afterwards. And, obviously you're paying a price, but I thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
So I think many people would pay the price if they want to get better at golf, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if we moved into the coaching section, and you mentioned before about working with some mini tour players and kind of go around challenge tour and so forth. You've worked with many of those elite players, and probably alongside many of the top coaches, because, you have that, meet these guys here. And when you're in those groups, who or what has been the biggest influence on your coaching career to date, both from a career / personal development and a teaching philosophy angle?
I think the biggest compliment to me, I could go on and list 25, 30, 40 coaches that have influenced my bias, personal teaching methods. Yeah. Right. But I think the biggest compliment to me is when somebody will comment one day on my Instagram saying this is very Stack and Tilt, and then the next day saying this is very George Gangas. They couldn't be further apart.
Yeah.
Right. This is very Morad. This is very Foley, etc. I think that's one of my biggest compliments is when somebody says that, because I've got a very holistic approach to coaching and how I help students. So I wouldn't say that there's one single person that I can, or a few single people that I could name 20 that have been a heavy influence on me. And I've been fortunate to build strong relationships with some of the best coaches in the world, and it's great, and I'm very fortunate and very thankful for that, which allow me to ask them the right questions. And I think that's the most important thing. Shadowing is great, but and it's something that I do a lot of, and a lot of students come and shadow me, but asking the right questions. The best coaches don't just tell players what to do, they help them understand the why so that they can kind of self-correct and understand what they're trying to do under pressure. And from that teaching philosophy standpoint, if we're going to go a little bit down the where I stand in the industry, it's been shaped by a blend of biomechanics, motor learning, and just real world coaching experience.
Yeah.
Understanding how different movement patterns produce different shots, understanding what a student's dispersion bandwidth is, and tailor my coaching to suit that individual player rather than forcing them into a rigid methodology. Like I said, if I get somebody that comes in, I'm like, well, they could do a little sprinkle of Stack and Tilt today. We can go a little bit down that rabbit hole just to get the student moving this way, because that will help them, and we've measured them. Using TPI as well, I think, has been really important for me, just to help understand the student's anatomy. Mark Ball from a 3D perspective. I use Sportsbox all the time as well.
Yeah.
Those certain things that allow me to give measurable data to base my opinion on what that student needs to do to get better is probably my biggest influence.
Yeah, I like that. I think from me, from a personal perspective, I've had this challenge over the last 3, 4, even going back 5 years of, if somebody asks me my philosophy or my teaching ideal, I find it really hard to describe it.
I do as well.
And what I found was in the last, and this is this is, it's not meant to come across as arrogant in any way, shape, or form. But I found there's nearly this divide. And you have coaches like what you're describing yourself, where it could be a stack and tilt lesson today. It could be a Sean Foley lesson. It could be Morad. It could be ground reaction forces, whatever the case may be. To be that type of golf coach is a lot more challenging mentally to be on the lesson tee and do that for your career. I this is not meant at anybody. It's not a slight at anybody. To be a system coach where you look at 4 or 5 things and they should always be aligned in the same way, to me is a little easier.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think what I'm trying to get across here without sounding or pissing anybody off or, you know, targeting anybody I really like the way you described that. Was I kind of can't describe it when you ask me that question, but here's what I think. And so I'm very malleable in terms of what I'm going to get on the lesson tee tomorrow. You know, if I've never met that person before, I'm going to use these tools that I have all around me like a librarian, and whatever one I think is going to be helpful to that player that day, that's what I'm going to use. I don't give a fuck what people say online.
Absolutely.
I don't give a fuck what it looks like. My job is to help them perform better. Yeah. And I kind of really, really like that. And I think that's the way we should be as coaches, that you have to be, you're there to help the player. You're not there to impose your thoughts and concepts on the player.
We all got bias, and I have bias that I could reel off. But I'll say all these bias, and there's 100 tour players that have won on tour that do not do anywhere near those bias. Yeah. So how can I say that that's the right way to teach?
Yeah, 100%.
And that's why some players work with some teachers and some players don't work with teachers.
Yeah. Yeah, we see that movement so much, right, between coaches and players. It's nearly like the NFL when you get like that head coach gets fired from one team and becomes a defensive coordinator on the next year and wins the Super Bowl. And he's the best thing. And you're like, well, why did that work? Well, it just he had the right fit at the right time. But I think, as you said, like part of the journey is the fun part, right? So as you're working with all these players, and I know this has probably happened to you, it's happened to me, where you're working with really good players and you kind of fuck it up a little bit on a session, and you leave the session going, I didn't get that right. But at the same time, you learn a lot from it, you know, and you can come back and be a better coach afterwards. So you mentioned some of the preferences, and I know this is a very loaded question, what we're going to do here, but you know, it's just to give you an opportunity maybe to go through.
Absolutely.
So if we, let's say, have a 15 handicap golfer, I've written here no physical issues. Now, since you mentioned TPI, I said this to Dave one day. I was like, but what happens if that person has no physical issues? And he said, there's nobody on the planet that has no physical issues. So we'll just we'll use a little poetic license for this one.
Brush over that.
Yeah, exactly. So 15 handicapper. Yeah. What are you looking to see at setup? And we'll say, let's say they're looking to hit small push draw pattern. What do you like to see it set up in the swing as a whole? Are we looking more at backswing, transition, impact, etc.? And again, granted, when you would look at that player, you would know what they're trying to do, and you would immediately see and recognize where to go to help them. You know, what are we looking to see it set up from that push draw pattern player?
Like you said, I think the first thing to know is intention. And you did allude to the intention there of hitting a push draw. What are they trying to do with a golf ball? What's their desired shape? Your job is to best equip men with the tools to produce that shot. So if we're looking at the push draw from a setup perspective, there's a lot of bias that I like, which are not just they're technically factual bias, which, all things being equal, will produce more of a push draw pattern. Ball a little bit further back, handle a little bit forward. Reason being, ball a bit further back, catching it earlier in the arc into out path. Handle forward, faces right at target. Perfect. Making sure that the sternum sits behind the pelvis from face on. Great. If somebody needs to baseline it a little bit right, then baseline it right. But I prefer to use ball position, all things being equal, to amend shot shape. Unless we're trying to hit fade when ball's on the floor, then I don't mind baselining it a little bit left. But we're push draw in here. So the main keys and the main fundamentals I'm looking for when we're looking for a push draw don't really align themselves from down the line, and more are a face-on bias for me, such as I don't like the ball position to go back of sternum anyway when the ball's on the floor, unless trying to hit a specialized shot like a low one. I don't like seeing it go further forward than the armpit, shall we say.
So a lot of players, I'm just going to say, a lot of club golfers if they're still listening to this part of this, would reference feet when they're looking at ball position, why reference upper tilt and upper sternum as opposed to the feet when you're looking at ball position?
Because your stance width could be way different to where your low point is relative, you know?
Yeah.
It's really important to note that when you're building stance width, when you're building, people say shoulder width apart, I prefer hip width apart because your legs are connected to your hips, they're not connected to your shoulders. Anyway, we won't get into that old school thing anyway. But I think it's really important to reference sternum and reference lead arm because it just references those points such as low point, our feet, our stance width isn't changing, which it changes for driver, wedge, etc. And the reason why I like more actually of a static ball position throughout the bag is it doesn't shift swing direction around too much.
Yeah.
So instead of actually going, okay, a wedge is at the back of my stance and 3 irons at the front of my stance, no, when the ball's on the floor, your ball position is going to sit between sternum and lead arm.
Yeah.
And if you're hitting a draw, it's going to be more towards the sternum. And if you're hitting a fade, it's going to be more towards lead arm.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the further that ball position is along in the arc, the further that pass is going to be traveling leftward. And as a right-handed golfer, we should say. So we'll be more
and obviously you've got those added things that when the ball's back, you're hitting down on it more, which also shifts path more right.
Yeah. You know? Excellent. So,
and that's why I'd use those points of reference to help a student. I'd also make sure that with that tilt, they might have a little bit more tilt than they would do if they were just in a stock shot, just to again influence those impact parameters that we're trying to affect.
And so as we move into that backswing, again, same type of player, are we looking for certain things to happen in backswing? Are we encouraging certain things? Or are we mainly saying, okay, well, the tilts that we've created, the ball position, everything we've created should influence that slightly in terms of what we're looking for?
It should influence it straight away slightly. Yeah, for sure. But if we're talking backswing potential preferences that could promote more of a push draw pattern, you're looking at a deeper, more rotary swing.
Okay.
Which generally can lend themselves to more speed as well, but can depend on the player again. Some might need a more vertical launch for a better pattern, and it's about understanding again what you can do. But those setup parameters are ones that I lean on quite heavily. Okay, if I could just change this straight away, I know I massively influence the shot shape that you want to hit.
Perfect. So, and I like that idea of kind of, intent and then looking at impact and trying to do it. You mentioned low hanging fruit earlier on, trying to do it in that way. And, you mentioned stack and tilt. One of those nice things from stack and tilt is the idea of setup and how that influences the grid system. Sort of so there's nice things in all of those aspects, but I like that. And then in terms of transition, downswing, anything you like to see, just like that, in terms of the swing direction, you've already kind of set up the path, the resultant path with the ball position and the alignments it's set up. So anything in swing direction, can you allow them to get swing direction a little bit leftward? What are you looking to see in downswing?
I think the one thing that I'm looking for more so is what's happening at P6. Kind of club parallel on the way down. Is the club toe up? Yeah. For a push draw pattern, clubs toe up, all things being equal, you rotate down to the ball, faces pointing right target, more influence to hit the push part of the push draw.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So the most important thing I think that people don't lend themselves to as well is the start line for that potential shot. What are the two things? I want to make sure that this start line is right of target.
Yeah.
Okay. If the bad shot for a drawer should be a push.
Yeah.
The push part of that push draw pattern. If you're doing that, then you're halfway there to being able to create a much more repeatable, tighter dispersion and tighter bandwidth in order to hit those shots. So I'm looking at toe up at P6, and I'm looking just for a little bit of a deeper hand path coming into the ball, kind of 4 or 5 on the way down. Yeah, is kind of where I would base my preferences at if you were looking.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. No, that's again, I recognize it's a bit of a loaded question without because you look at things the same way. You're like, but perhaps, and I understand that. So you did a great job on that in terms of that. It just helps players sometimes get an idea, especially if the club golfer's still listening. Even the idea of a push draw, like they hear draw and they go, well, that club face has to be closed. Well, not necessarily so, right? You need that push part. So you actually need the face a little bit open at impact, just leftward of the club path. So let's have a little look of some of the content that you've done online. And we're just going to have a couple of looks at some videos here that we've got. And this is just some of the stuff that you've kind of posted online that we're going to have a little look at. And what we're going to do is going to play this through, and then you can kind of explain a little bit of what we're working on here and what we're seeing.
Yeah. So this is a mini tour player. He's actually got through to final stage of Q School a couple times. Very close to just having that one thing that he needs to do to get onto tour.
Yeah.
But Joe struggles more so with a pelvis that sits too much in the backswing and almost reverses towards a target too much. He doesn't load enough up and out into trail side. He doesn't get pressures. He doesn't unweight his lead foot.
Okay.
And it causes him to get a little bit narrow with his hand path going back. Basically, his arms collapse. He gets quite wristy to the top.
Right.
So this band here, where he's got it around his foot and he's gripping it out with his left hand, is to encourage trying to stretch that band almost over his right shoulder through backswing, over his trail shoulder.
Nice. Yeah.
Reason why we're trying to do this is he struggles then really with a little bit of a toey strike usually, because he's a little bit reversed, and then he backs up, raises the handle and hits the toe.
Okay.
We can just feel him getting that stretch a little bit more through backswing. It enables him to land left. He loves to hit a draw as well. So he can actually unweight, shift into the ball a bit more, get a little bit more pelvis sway into the ball. And segueing on from what we were saying just now, actually quite nicely, get that push part of the push draw pattern.
Yeah. Right? I really like this video. And for those listening, basically, Alex has this player. He has a band around the lead foot underneath the lead toe area. And then that player also has the band around the handle of the golf club and is gripping it and basically moving into backswing, trying to stretch that band. Now, there's another little addition that Alex just mentioned there. We're going to have a little look here where he actually gets this player then to create that position in backswing. So that nice stretch with the hands into top of backswing. And then you're just going to see that description that Alex was talking about. Now he can land left. And I really like that, the way you're comboing the two. And, okay, well, I know if he gets a little bit more right, creates that little bit more stretch, he probably will start moving that way anyway. But I like this idea of really getting that player to move that way, get him landing into that left side. And do you use bands an awful lot? You like using bands in exercises?
Yeah, whatever I can use to get the student to understand what we're trying to get them to do. Bands
whatever, however.
Yeah, bands are a heavy part of that, definitely. But
I think they're very, very good, right? They're very helpful because I like the idea of there is, obviously description, which is great, using verbiage and asking a player, telling a player what you would like to see happen. But I think if you can put the player in an exercise that actually activates what you're looking to do, the areas, the muscles, the tendons, I think that can be really, really good.
Sure.
So something you mentioned earlier on, which I thought when we're talking about that push drop pattern, when we're talking about stuff, was ball position. And this is why I really, really like this video when you're talking about the ball position. And
what we're going to do is this lad because he's Irish.
Yeah, probably. I heard the accent. We're going to stay quiet through this video in the first part. And if you guys, just when you're listening, just listen to what Alex has to say here about ball position. Hopefully it's loud enough as we play this through.
Playing the ball back subconsciously because of, as you went to the top, go to the top, pelvis would slide that way, upper body would come this way. Yeah. And then from there, your equal and opposite reaction, because you've overextended, is to go that way. And that's when your low points move back. So you've gone, well, if I just move my ball back, I can find a strike. I can find a strike, yeah. But it's not the way to do it. Essentially, if you fix your pivot and move the ball forward, you're going to get that lower flight because your spine angle and everything is going to be more on top of the ball as you're coming through. Yeah.
So the really interesting thing about that is your description of, okay, well, why is the ball position back there in the first place? And the idea and concept that ball position matches up, or players, definitely good players, start matching and moving that ball position around to match up to what they're doing in the golf swing. And so when they change the golf swing, sometimes that ball position necessitates a change also. So this player, good player, I'll let you describe it a little bit more, what you're working on with this guy. You mentioned, we kind of heard it a little bit at the start of the video, but the main kind of concepts for this guy?
Struggles with sway, off of the ball in the backswing, pelvis moves a bit too far to the right, causes him to overextend the upper body towards the target. Has the reverse effect on the way down. Pelvis slides excessively towards the target, upper body tilts away from the target. Now, being a good player, he's then hit a couple of fat shots and gone, well, I just need to move the ball back a little bit because I need to find a strike.
Yeah.
Right. So looking straight objectively at this player and going, oh, his ball position's too far back of my bias. Let me just move your ball position up straight away, mate. He'd hit it 3 inches behind the ball and struggle.
Yeah.
Right.
And you never see him again.
Yeah. And that'll be it. It'll be good night. Keep your money. I won't end up charging you. But I think understanding why a player has done what they have actually done. Why has he subconsciously moved the ball back? He hasn't done it on purpose a lot of the time. He's just gone, I'm fatting it a bit, or the ball's coming out a little bit high, which again is the backing up of the upper body and increasing loft.
Yeah.
Why is the ball coming out a bit high? I need to get this out of the air. What's some things I can do to get it out of the air? Let me play it back a bit in my stance.
Yeah, throw it back there. And as you said, it's nearly a subconscious reaction, especially in better players, you know, and then you showed it. They're like, as you said, I think that's what I like about this video in particular was, as you said, very easy to look at that ball position and go, hey, it's too far back, move it forward. But you got to understand the why. Why is the ball back there? And then understand the movements, which again, don't want to kind of give you too big a head, but I really like this one. I love this one. This is the last one we're going to look at, and we'll again play it through a little bit. Hopefully people can hear what's been said and what's discussed in this video.
Wide, narrow. Good. And again, wide to narrow. Now sequence it as one move.
So what we got there is a player, just for people listening, we've got a player where Alex has them working on in backswing, really feeling like they're getting a lot wider, meaning those hands are pushing away. And if we just play the last segment of this video, you'll actually hear him talk about a little bit of wrist set here.
Wide, narrow. Good. Don't take it back as far. And go wider with no set in the backswing. Now, hinge it in. There you go.
So that player really trying to take it wide with no wrist set and then actually narrowing it in transition. And again, the reason why I like this is it's a common thing I see in 3D when looking at club golfers is we actually have narrow in backswing and wide in transition. So that club, those hands getting wider in transition. This is why I really like this drill. So again, I'll just let you kind of describe it better than I did. What were you working with this player? What were the reasons for this?
Same reasons you just alluded to, mate, to be honest. He gets very narrow on the way back, restricts his turn, arms get too close to him.
Mm-hmm.
So then to try and get the club back out in front, opposite effect on the way down, big throw, lack of rotation again on the way through, standing up through the ball, struggles with low point. So one thing that you need to get this player, first of all, to understand is the swing arc, the hands, create that banana of wide on the way back and then narrower on the way down.
Yeah.
As well, because we're moving closer to the target on the way down.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But I think that the key important thing here that we were working on with the student, like I said, was just giving him a little bit more. He'd struggle from going narrow, throw, no compression, adding loft at impact, and lack of a better term, not getting that zip punch off of the face when he's trying to hit it. Lacking that compression, those wrist angles at impact.
The real thing that kind of stood out to me, and again, this is where everybody sees things differently, right? So we all see the world a little bit differently. And the thing I really liked about this is I've seen this before with coaches, and I've been around coaches coaching the same thing as we're seeing here, but they've done what we call freezer drills, where they've got the player in the backswing and got them to extend, push the hands further away, and then go from there. The thing I really liked about this was you were getting the feeling of the player, but keeping the rhythm and the timing and the flow in the golf swing. So he was the transference or the distance between his actual task when he would get over a golf ball and what you were trying to get him to do was very narrow, which I really like, no pun intended, which I really liked, versus you could have had him over a golf ball, swing to the top of backswing, push the hands further away, then swing down, hit the ball off the... It just wouldn't have fitted as well as this player. Is there any time that you do kind of go to those more freezer things, or are you conscious about that, trying to narrow or maintain the distance or lack of distance between the task that you want them to do, which is hit the golf ball on a golf course, and what you're doing on the range?
I do use a lot of freezer pulls, exaggerated swings.
Okay.
Right. But they should be blended very, very appropriately with full swings.
Yeah. Yeah,
such as if we're going to do freezer or pull swings, I don't want you to do 20 of them in a row.
Yeah.
I want you to, do the classic, set everything up in piles of 4.
Mm-hmm.
First swings are pulls, second swing's at 20%, third swing's at 50%, last swing's full speed. Go back to the start.
Okay.
So if we are having a pause swing, we're not followed by a pause, 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 pause. It's a pause followed by mega slow without the pause, followed by 50%, followed by full speed.
Yeah.
So it just helps blend in those pieces that we're actually trying to change and exaggerate feeling from the slower pause swings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the thing where, you know, if you're a golf coach and you're learning to be a golf coach, the first thing, okay, I got to get better technique. I got to understand why the ball does what it does. Probably the last thing we kind of hit on as through our own development is how the human learns, right? In terms of motor patterns, motor learning, it's tough, right? So you're kind of trying to learn that as you go, and nearly everybody else, every person has a case study of one in terms of how they like to be talked to. And so it's a challenging aspect, but I always look to gym training, and you know, you get training, go to your gym trainer, and it's like, okay, well, do this for 10 reps, do this for 10 reps, do this for 10 reps. And it's very set out, and that's what you go do. And golf coaching, I think we're very far away from that, right? It's kind of like, well, here's the fields, and best of luck, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. And let me know how you get on, and you go interpret it whatever way you like. We'll see the fallout.
And that again is equipping a student with what they should do outside of a lesson, which is why online instruction is decent as well. Like a lot of my players work in the way that I've just said then.
Yeah, 100%.
I had a really good. He played Walker Cup a few years ago. Good player. And he's been up practicing at the club that I teach at last few days and things like that. Not me, I'd give him a lesson, then he's just practicing away. But he's literally following it to a set pattern. He'll go over to the downshift board and he'll work a couple of drills. He'll get a grip out. He'll get the club out that I've put a putter grip on with the flat side, just so he can feel face a little bit more. He'll do a couple drills of that. He'll get a club. He'll hit a couple shots. He'll go back to the downshift board. Just seeing him go through this repetition of what he's trying to do is so good. Yeah, that's what it. You know, he said he'd usually take half hour to hit a basket of balls, and that'd be it. Now he's taking an hour and a half to hit a basket of balls, and the quality of repetition and quality of pattern changing or quality of practice is just gone up immensely.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you look at the habits of the best. You know, and you start being privy to those conversations or those knowledges. When you assess your career to this point, right? So where you are right now, what are the areas you're still looking to improve to continue your progress? Like, you know, so when you're looking 3, 4, 5 years down the road, what are the areas you still think you can get better at? You know, you're content where you are, but you want to be, I presume, want to be one of the best, one of the top ones. So what are those areas you're looking to improve?
So I'm constantly looking to improve my knowledge in terms of every aspect of coaching, right? Not just swing mechanics, but also performance psychology, core strategy, how the best players absorb the information that I'm trying to give them, right? Staying up to date with new trends in coaching, testing and debunking them where necessary as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and it's something that I take seriously when someone comes across with a new concept, and I'm like, okay, let me try it.
Yeah,
let me give it a go. Let me be my guinea pig. Let me have a go at this and see what works. Or let me find a lot of players that actually don't do what they're trying to get somebody to do.
Yeah.
Right. The industry is always evolving. And being a great coach, in my opinion, means continuous refinement and adapting your methods and your teaching abilities, right? So to what actually works for players in real world life performance. So I'd say for me, if you're going to pinpoint anything, I really want to start diving in more to the performance psychological aspect of things. And how people at not only the elite level, but the elite level practice and why they do what they do and how they go about doing it and how they go about absorbing that information, I think is something that I could certainly get better at. Yeah. As well as everything I mentioned there, every aspect, always learning new methods and things like that.
Yeah, I think the really interesting thing I found being around better and better players over the last couple of years has been, you know, nearly your default when you teach a club golfer is sometimes the issue is very evident, right? You wouldn't need a spotlight to find it. And when you get around these really, really great players, there really is no issue. No. And you're like, okay, well, there's no technical issue. So the only area that's kind of left to explore is what you're talking about. And I think that's why I've kind of started to trend towards that direction too. As you work with better and better players, it's not so much the technical aspect, it's the performance, it's the holistic, it's how are they training, how are they eating, what's their blood work like, all these things. Yeah.
But the other thing really, I think, which can segue into other potential avenues, obviously, but how is what they're doing on the range comparing to what they're doing in performance, in tournaments? How is your club golfer comparing to what they do on the range, comparing to what they're doing in the midweek Stableford, right?
We'll go with a 0 on that one, probably.
Yeah, but how can we capture that data and use it to, getting out on course is something that golf coaches rarely do with their students, but it's the first thing they should do.
It's tricky. I remember who we'd have on the show a while back. I think it was Mike Carroll. From Fit for Golf, and he's like, if you look at, Olympic sports, where's the coaches? They're on the side of the track as the person runs in the Olympics, right? And we're probably on the range teaching lesson with all our kids or juniors or club players, right? But it just takes so much time, right? It's very, very tricky to do. But I think that's why we rely so heavily on those apps. And I know Up Game and a lot of work they're doing with TrackMan in terms of, the rounds that you put into Up Game now, because they've been purchased by TrackMan, then in TrackMan, they actually create tasks in and around the data that you've put in, which is really good. And I know a lot of coaches are using AI from that data to create tasks, which is fantastic too.
And I think just quickly on that as well, I think it's really important to understand what that student is doing, yes, but also exactly like you just said there, how can I use that data to make them better, and how can I create or best create those stressed environments when we're practicing?
Yeah. Make it hard.
Yeah, make it really hard. Make it harder than what the course is.
Yeah, and have some consequences. Last thing, we have some great technology that we mentioned at the start in terms of like a little bit of grip stuff coming out. Launch monitors you mentioned. We got the 3D with Sports Box, etc., which is coming on leaps and bounds. What are you looking forward to, or what would you like to see over the next couple of years technology-wise that would help your coaching?
I think we're going down the right avenue with all of the right technology that's being created at the moment. What excites me the most is the evolution of 3D data and AI-driven potential coaching tools. Filming with an online perspective, I do, going back to that on-course discussion that we just had, I get students to film their on-course data. I get students to film on-course swings. Oh, just get your mate to prop your phone up and just film me an on-course swing. It's not a problem. I think then using things like Sportsbox AI to help us understand how a student's moving on a golf course from just your mobile phone makes high-level biomechanical analysis accessible to your everyday golfer. Again, online instruction is also advancing rapidly. Players can get the instant feedback, the structured plans, etc., etc. But the ability to integrate the force plates, launch monitors, and the biomechanical data with on-course in performance, like we alluded to, I think is really, really cool and can help us create practice plans based on what we're telling the student to do or what the data is telling us. And the key for me is not necessarily what I would like to see, because I think we're doing everything as we should. The one I would have said would have been the grip pressure, to be completely honest. Then I went to the PGA show, to the Open Forum, and there's a guy that's using a grip pressure thing. I'm like, well, that's out.
Done.
So,
we're good.
Pick that. But use the technology as a tool to help you improve, rather than using it as a crutch or overwhelming players unnecessarily with the data. So we can have all these technologically great advancements in the game, but the best coaches apply the technology to help the player improve efficiently and effectively, which give you that strong foundation to help you build a player's game to where they would like to achieve in line with their goals. Basically, everyone has different goals, but how you can use the technology best to your advantage to help that player improve.
I think sometimes when you only have certain technology at your disposal, every player is going to get exposed to that technology.
Yeah.
And sometimes that might not be the best thing. And I think my concern would be that we get so much technology available that we get okay at a lot of things rather than an expert in one thing, and we don't understand the data. And I've seen it occur in sessions where I've watched other coaches where, and they're showing the screen with Sportsbox on it, and it's like, but I don't understand that, and neither does the coach. And I'm like, that's a problem. So I think that nice idea of synergy between everything, where we could get all the data to work together in some way, shape, or form as we move forward, to, as you said, benefit the player who is the most important person in the room, not us.
Is there going to be an app where I could punch in a player's data from Sportsbox, decade, say, up game?
Yeah.
Sportsbox, up game, Trackman Foresight, anything else that you might measure? Is there hack motion data? Is there do-whiz data? Have they got your 3D biomechanical data? Have you got those headbands that you wear to get that? Like, punch all of that into an app and go, right, what do I need to do?
Quit.
Yeah.
Take up tennis. All right, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Just for anybody who, like, as I said, and I don't mean to harp on about it because I'm not trying to embarrass you or anything like that, but I really, I do follow some people online in terms of Instagram and socials, but I don't really follow a lot or watch a lot, let's say. But yours was one of the ones that I always find interesting. I always find it good information, reliable information. It's well presented, and players are benefiting from it. So for anybody there, it's just Alex Clapp Golf on Instagram, on X as well. Everywhere. Perfect, nice and easy. The website is just alexclappgolf.com.
There you go.
See? Love the simplicity, man. But I would recommend everybody to kind of follow Alex online, and then jump on Skillest. If you're on Skillest, just go to that coach search and just put in Alex Clapp, and you'll see, I'm sure you'll see that lovely face pop up very, very shortly as one of the more popular ones. But thank you so much for taking the time, man. I really, really appreciate it. I know it's getting a little later there in the UK. So hopefully we'll meet up in person soon, and we can do some content or something together, and it'll be fun.
Absolutely. Thanks again for your kind words, and thanks for having me on, mate. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll catch up soon. Sure.
All right, man. Take care.
Take care.
All right, everyone, so that wraps up another episode of Shammocks and Shanks. A huge thank you to Alex for joining us today and sharing his insights and knowledge about all things golf related. Be sure to follow Alex on his socials. The username or handle is @AlexClappGolf, and check out the website alexclappgolf.com for more great content. Of course, thank you to all of our listeners. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to rate, review, and share it with your fellow golfers. Your support helps us grow and bring you even more top-tier guests and content. Don't forget to subscribe also so you never miss a new episode, and follow me on Instagram, X, YouTube for updates, behind the scenes content, and much, much more. As always, if you want to work with myself in person, online, or indeed have any questions on golf or the podcast, you can contact me on Instagram @SteveMooreGolf or through the website stevemoregolf.com. Finally, for your own game, don't forget, work hard, work diligently, but most importantly, work smart, and we'll talk to you again soon.